Welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Andy.
And I'm Michelle.
What are we going to call this?
I don't think you have to say the name. I think we can talk about what we're going to talk about.
That's what I'm saying.
Is that a hickey?
Okay, so for today's video, we're going to be talking about therapy. What that experience was like, what led us to therapy, what to expect, and what led us to where we are today. So stay tuned. What leads anybody to therapy, actually?
A lot of things. A lot. Usually, I feel like they're just issues that you feel like you just could no longer handle yourself.
But what point do you have to get to be like, I can't do this by myself anymore? Like, does somebody tell you? Like, do you just think of it on your own? Like, when I started therapy, it was because of something. It wasn't like I was like, I have all these problems, I need to see an expert.
Well, you see, that was you. When I went, there was nothing at that moment. I think for me was the things we had going on in our lives was so overwhelming where I'm like, maybe I should consider
Like
it
what,
too.
though?
I think a lot of it had to do shortly after you tried to commit suicide. Is when I felt things were a little too overwhelming for me because I felt like we didn't really have anybody. I didn't have anybody to really be there. Yes, my husband at the time was there and he was supportive, but I feel like I needed a little bit more than that. More like the brothers and sisters we have and they weren't there. That's what I wanted.
But in all fairness, that's a lot to put on a person.
It is.
That's a lot to even put on a spouse. I didn't have one, but if I'd be like, that's a lot to put on a spouse.
It is.
And some people can do that, but that doesn't work for everybody.
And then that's when I knew the feelings were too overwhelming, and I felt like it felt like a burden. Like I didn't know. At times I didn't even know what to do. And I was like, how am I gonna do this? You know, because aside from that, I still had to go to work. And then I think I started worrying a lot about you. There was a lot of things that I had to consider. A lot, you know. Every time I think about it as a waitress holding these platters with all these cups and plates and trying not to make sure that they fall. That's how I always feel. That's how I always pictured it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I didn't realize it at the time, but I think when I finally realized how good therapy was, I was like, man, thank the universe I started going to therapy, because I feel like when a person can go to therapy and deal with their issues sooner than later, you're doing everybody around you a service, especially yourself, because then you're able to figure out what is it that's really going on, what's at the root of like you not being able to make relationships work, or you're feeling like maybe you're a problem in a relationship, or you feeling like you have these things that you just don't know how to fix. And I think in retrospect I did feel like that, but I wouldn't have been able to pinpoint it then. It's like I only know that now because of everything I've been through.
Of course.
But so I was already in therapy when I attempted to commit suicide, and I had already been in therapy maybe for like about a year. Maybe no, I had to have been less than that, I think, because I remember calling my therapist from.
I think you were like 6 months in already, though.
Yeah, I was definitely going to therapy already, because I remember calling my therapist and her being like, I can't believe this. I can't believe I didn't see the sign. And I think maybe she also felt really disappointed. We didn't talk a whole lot about it, but I think she also felt disappointed in herself that she didn't see like the sign, or she didn't think. But you see, the thing was that I never spoke about like committing suicide, and it was never something that I really thought of per se. Like I never thought about like how I would do it or anything like that. I think it was like, for me, it was like one of those things like in the moment. And when I tried to commit suicide, it wasn't something so rare because I had already seen it happen in our family.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it's a very, very selfish thing to do. And how old was Jacob at the time?
He was like 2.
No, he wasn't that little.
Yes, he was.
Mm-hmm.
We were living. Yeah, we were living.
T78.
No, we weren't.
Yes, we were. We were
Oh,
in the same
yes,
year.
we were. I was thinking of Montebello.
No, I think he must have been like 4.
Yeah.
4 or 5, something like that. And I remember thinking like that I wasn't the person suited to be his parent. And I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about like, oh, how is he gonna grow up without a mom? I didn't think about any of those things. It was just kind of like one of those things that are like really in the moment. And also too, I think the person that I was with at the time also had a really huge influence. And um, the fact that he knew that I wasn't mentally stable, and the fact that he knew that I had all these things going on, and at that moment he was like breaking up with me, and I was just kind of like, no. I felt like my world was falling apart because he filled a void that my mom, like, he showed me so much love and attention in a way that my parents never did. And so for that person to like be like, I don't want to be with you, or I can't be with you, it was like, no, you can't disappoint me too. And I think ultimately that's what led to it. Yeah. That on top of like going to therapy and dealing with all like this emotional baggage that I had been carrying for 20 something years of my life, which was a really long time, and I had some fucked up shit to deal with that I was just kind of like, man, how do you do it? It's a lot. And I think that that's one of the things that you have to be like mentally, you need to kind of like mentally prepare yourself for, depending like what kind of trauma you have. If you have trauma at all, some people don't have trauma. Some people just have other emotional distress or other things that they want to deal with. But I had so much trauma from like years and years and years and years and years. Dysfunctional, like living with a dysfunctional family, having parents who were not good parents, having like growing up with a very like cold mom who didn't love, who didn't show, like love, who didn't tell you regularly, I love you, you're my child.
Or being very affectionate at all.
Yeah, and so when you grow up, you're like, you look for it in other people. And so that's what I did. And I found it in this person that I like ultimately adored and just kind of like glorified to a very unhealthy extent. But that was a catalyst to me actually going to therapy and me, going through like all these different changes that I couldn't even imagine to be where I'm at today.
I feel like for me, not receiving, like you said, the attention and the proper care and love led me to doing certain behaviors.
Like what?
For the attention. And I think that's one thing that I learned through therapy.
Like what though?
Like the love.
But you said behavior, so it's like, what kind of behaviors do you think?
I would say seeking attention, playing the victim, being like, I came from a fucked up family,
Help me, poor.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I feel like even though like obviously we grew up in the same household, I didn't see things differently, and I didn't care so much for the attention as I did for like the love. Like I know an attention was a thing for you, but it wasn't for me as much, the attention. It was more just like I just wanted love. I just needed somebody to teach me that I'm loved and how to love somebody else, but more than that, just loving myself.
I think the saddest thing growing up that I could remember is just wanting to be hugged and loved, and being able to be at such a young age and be like, I can't ask for the simplest thing that costs nothing, which I think to me was the saddest thing. And as an adult, you think, oh, I'm an adult, I make my own choices, this and that. Not when you have to learn how to love yourself, love people, and what made it even harder is loving your own child. How do you do it? It sounds silly, but it's true. It's like, how do you?
That has been one of my biggest struggles. I remember Jacob being really little too and being like, I don't want to be a mom. I do not want to be a mom. And I remember telling that boyfriend at the time, and he would just kind of look at me like, oh girl, what do you mean you don't want to be a mom? The kid's already here. You can't take him back.
I think I struggled a little bit with postpartum after I had Danica.
I think I did so to a degree.
Where
but I didn't know it was called that. I don't think we called it that. I don't think
it was ever really brought up, but I remember there was times where I was just like, oh wow, because I did spend a year at home with her, and it wasn't, it was pretty challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I'm so glad that I went to therapy when I did. And as hard as it was, I'm so glad that I did it because now that Jacob's older, I'm in a way better position to like be a good role model and be a good mom and be like, okay, now that I know all these things, you know, I don't want to make the same mistakes that my parents made, and him feeling like my mom doesn't love me or she doesn't show me any love, which has been my biggest struggle. Um, because when you never get taught how to love, how can you love your own kid?
No, not just that. When you don't love yourself alone.
Yeah. That's part of it too.
That's part of it too.
Yeah.
You know, when you're going through therapy, I don't think that you don't have much love for yourself because it's, you know, you're hard on yourself. You're your own worst critic, and you're like, how did I get this far? How did I allow this to happen? And to be able to come out of that and be like, I'm better than this, and I'm gonna do better, and I'm gonna try hard. It wasn't easy. It was hard.
I went through having to talk to my therapist about all the things that I went through in my childhood and how hard it was, and she was always like taken aback. But the hardest part I want to say for therapy for me was my therapy would say, Andy, you're so hard on yourself. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. You should be so proud. I was just about to finish my bachelor's, and I had already applied to the master's program at Cal State LA, and I think I'd already gotten accepted. And so looking back and thinking like how far I had gotten at that point in my life, I had already accomplished so much. And even though I did have Jacob at such a young age, I got pregnant when I was 17, and she's like, are you proud of yourself? And she's asking me, and I'm just looking at her, and she's like, are you proud of yourself? And she's like listing all these things that she's like, you should be proud of yourself. And I just start crying.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I just start crying because one, I couldn't take a compliment, and two, I didn't think of myself in that way. And I was just kind of like, no one's ever told me that, you know? And it was even so hard for me at that moment to admit like, wow, I had gotten this far. But I always took it for granted because it's like, no, these are things I need to do in order for my son to have a better future. At least I thought.
Have you noticed how awkward we could get sometimes when we're complimented? I feel like that's something that I never even think about. I think what I always think about, I want to do better and just be better, not just for myself, but for Danica as well. You know, for the people around me. I never think about, you know, I think when people bring it up, I even get taken back sometimes, like, you know, the things we've gone through, the things we've done, you know, and it's just kind of like, I think sometimes it's hard to take a step back and like, we have done a lot. We have gone through a lot. But I feel like that's one thing that has really helped us to really move forward. I feel like there's days where I still get down from time to time, and I'll have to be like, I did not come this far to give up. Because it's really easy to give up. It's really easy to throw in the towel, like, fuck it, I don't care anymore. You know, when things get tough.
I mean, I think one of the things that helped me was that I feel like I always had so much determination, especially when it came to finishing school, because those were the things that I was the most proudest of. Or one of the things, because Jacob was the most person I'm proud of. But just being like, okay, failure is not an option.
Definitely.
Which was good, but at the same time, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be like, I need to finish, I need to do this, I need to do that. At that time, because now I see things differently, and more than anything, because I want to be a role model for him and be like, go to college and, you know, do the things you love and passionate, but that might not be college.
I think for me was being emotionally healthy, because my depression got so deep, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Where I was on medication, I was sleeping all day, I was missing so much work. It was hard to have your child come home and then you're waking up at 5 and trying to function and be like, hey, you know, my day was great, I did all these things, and
lying to your kid and being like, how was school, how was this, how was that, when
all you could think about is crawling back under those blankets and being left alone. That's how I would think about all the time. And I think it was hard because it wasn't easy. And I would always be like, I remember we would always talk about it, and I would be like, when is this ever going to go away? When is this sad feeling ever going to go away? I think there was times where I contemplated suicide, because I feel like depression was like this saddest feeling ever that's just never going to go away. And there was no end to it. So I feel like I'm such a burden. I'm not doing anything with myself. I can't do anything. You just feel like you're like this void in the way, like you're a burden. That's how I felt at the time. I felt like I was a burden. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm just in the way, and I'm just better off just not even being here. You don't think about the impact you have on people. You don't think about the people around you. And that was also one of the side effects of the medication. I would try several different medications, and I already knew when I started a medication, that was one of the side effects. And I hated it because it was so hard to be like, we're not going to think like that. You know, people depend on us. You know, not only did I have my daughter, but I had my husband at the time, and he was great. He was great. He was a great support system. He was there for me. He was there with me through the whole depression. And, you know, some people are real quick to bounce him, like, I can't do this with you. And he stuck through both of us. You know, he was there also too. And it was great. But I feel like there was just some things he just couldn't do for me. There was just some things that I had to learn how to do for myself. And I remember along with that came a lot of anxiety. I became a homebody. I would get so anxious. When we would go out, all I could think about was returning home. It was so bad. I would have to carry bags in my cars and breathe because I would hyperventilate because I was so overwhelmed about being around people. It was bad. It was really bad. I was always moody, and I think at one point I was just like, I hated everything around me. Nothing made me happy. And I think if it did, it was very shortly lived. Very shortly lived.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I hit rock bottom when I was at the rehab, because I remember talking to a psychiatrist, not a therapist, a psychiatrist. The difference being that a psychiatrist can prescribe medication and a therapist can't. And so I talked to a psychiatrist, and I knew I had hit rock bottom when she told me. She's like, Andy, she's like, do you know you've been depressed all your life? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, what? No. What are you talking about, you know? And so she starts telling me like what she sees, and, you know, things like she was analyzing me and she was telling me things. And that was the last time I saw that boyfriend. It was over then, and we never got back together ever again. But I needed to do so much of my own, just like healing. And she's like, you can't be with anybody. You're not capable mentally of being with anybody because you just have so much that you need to deal with. And I was against medication from day one. I was like, nope, I am not going to be on medication. I don't need it. I could do this without it. At least I had thought. But the overwhelming feelings of sadness was just so great, like you said. It was just so great that I was like, she told me, we talked about it, and we made a deal where it was like, I'm going to start on this day and end on this exact day a year from now. And that's exactly what I did.